Coming up next on One Detroit, a popular Ukrainian band with a Detroit connection uses music to protest Russian President Putin's regime and the war in their country. Also ahead, we'll check in on two friends who teamed up 1 year ago to denounce violence and hatred against Asian Americans. Plus, it's Women's History Month, and we're looking at the life and legacy of the late African-American author Zora Neale Hurston. It's all coming up next on One Detroit.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, MASCO Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. MASCO, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the KRESGE Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. NISSAN Foundation, and viewers like you.
Just ahead on this week's One Detroit, the community comes together to remember Asian Americans who were victims of hate crimes and violence. We'll catch up with the co-founders of the local activist group Whenever We're Needed, which was created after 6 Asian women were murdered in Atlanta, Georgia 1 year ago. They talk about where things stand in their efforts to fight racism against Asian Americans. It's part of our AAPI stories here on Detroit Public TV and WDET. Also ahead, the late Zora Neale Hurston is described as one of the most prolific writers of the 20th century. American Black Journal looks at her impact on African-American literature as seen through the eyes of another Black female author who was greatly inspired by Hurston's writings. But first up, the story of a Ukrainian quartet delivering powerful world messages through their music. DakhaBrakha's unique music style is familiar to audiences at the Detroit Concert of Colors and WDET radio listeners. But these days, the band has gone into hiding in Ukraine as Russia wages war on the country. One Detroit senior producer Bill Kubota has the story.
DakhaBrakha, likened to Russia's Pussy Riot, persecuted for their fight against political oppression, but DakhaBrakha, they're Ukrainian, with a Detroit connection.
The music is out there. It has a Ukrainian traditional base, but goes every which way. They're big into jazz, they're big into rock. They even do a little bit of Ukrainian rap, but it also has a very classical sound. It's really hard to pinpoint the style because it's their own style.
DakhaBrakha's made appearances in the local Concert of Colors music series, seen here on Detroit Public TV, thanks to Ishmael Ahmed. Ahmed created the series. He got to know the band through his public radio program.
Given that I, work at WDET and do This Island Earth, which is, I guess, a world music show, but a show that is allowed to go everywhere. That's unusual for radio. It's a good fit, and so I play them quite a bit.
Performances like these, perhaps at risk, part of the culture many Ukrainians believe the Russians would like to do away with. Ahmed's talking with the band's artistic manager on the line from Ukraine.
Yes, have you been affected by the bombing?
We can hear it all the time. Sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's far, but my house is still safe.
I was talking to Irena Gorban. She's very much part of the band. She travels with them. She faces everything they face.
We sleep in a bathroom or in a basement, because we have this air alarms all the time.
DakhaBrakha has been protesting war and the Putin regime during their shows for years. The band members are hunkered down in undisclosed locations. They're okay for now.
It's a mainly women's group, and so I don't think men could make that kind of music. They conquer their audiences over and over, and the word spreads. They're now a major world performing group. Turns out that their agent, Bill Smith, is an old friend of mine, and he is a discoverer. He finds some of the best music on the planet and not your normal music. So he's the one that turned me on to them.
DakhaBrakha first toured North America in 2013, returning often until COVID hit. There were plans to come to the U.S. again in late March, but then came war.
They are literally shelling right now. And one of the things I was warned is that they might have to duck for cover in the middle of the interview, or maybe it wouldn't come off. The Russian authorities are trying to take down internet and all possibility of communications. So this was done under duress, but they are brave, and Irina is brave, and so, they want the world to know what's going on.
I don't know how to explain this, but people get used to it. So now we are all in this kind of stress when we try to be united, try to be calm, try to help each other. We really believe that as long as we can stay here, we will stay here. I tell this now because now I'm calm and confident. But in several hours, I don't know what will be. So maybe I change my mind in several hours and left city this night or tomorrow. So nobody knows.
Whether it's Concert of Colors or this Island Earth on WDET, we're living in a world where this music is being made, where horrible things are going on, and people are struggling, but they're also struggling to tell us. And they do that through their music. Music is a powerful force. I'm happy that I'm able to help get out the word through these musicians. We have to understand what kind of world we live in, and we can't stay numb to things like starvation and refugees and immigration problems and war. I mean, literally there is war happening all over the planet. Some smaller wars, some huge wars like this one. We've got to be involved, and the music helps us to do that. Do you think that you will ever be playing music again?
For sure. No any doubt. And I think we will do it even sooner than it's expected, because I'm sure now the world needs Ukrainian culture to understand the difference between Ukrainian and Russian people and to see the deepness of Ukraine and Ukrainian culture.
They are a direct target. And they've been told that. They are one of the most powerful voices in Ukraine against what is happening, both culturally and politically. And so they do these interviews at a great, great risk. Well, we'd love to have you back in Detroit.
Thank you. Thank you. We're really also we miss US so much because of these 2 years of break and tour in US. It's really very moving and very, very great to hear this.
After a gunman killed 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent, last year in Atlanta, Zora Bowens called her best friend, Sina Vang. She wanted to check in on how she was feeling, but Zora had also started to notice a pattern similar to what led to the George Floyd protests, instances of violence escalating to murder. The two of them felt called to action and created the activist organization Whenever We're Needed. They sat down together in conversation to reflect on the impact they've had since organizing their first rally and the work that still needs to be done in the latest story in DPTV's and WDET's AAPI Stories.
So how did you feel last year and the year before when all of this tension started building up around hate towards the Asian community?
I honestly felt very desensitized to it. You know, of course, when it became like an ongoing thing, it was shocking, but I think that naturally, like, it's so easy to just become desensitized to hate crimes that everyone, you know, witnesses on a daily basis. But I feel like it wasn't until you had called me that day where you brought it up to my attention, and that's truly what inspired me to feel that we should do something. Like, that's when I felt called to action, because if my friend who isn't Asian but is also a person of color can see something that I know exists and is kind of reminding me like, hey, let's do something, like, that for me was the push to get up and do something with you.
Just, you know, you kind of, especially with social media, it's like a constant bombarding of things that are happening. But, you know, after the George Floyd protests kind of settled down and we started following the trials and everything like that. So the night before I called you, I actually got stopped by the police in Hamtramck, and I was so scared because obviously everything that happens with Black people and police interactions sometimes. And the police interaction was actually so nice. It was the most polite police interaction I've ever had. And that's when I realized, like, the work that we've done has maybe had an impact. And also I felt like my community was going to be okay. When I saw the news about the spa shooting, it felt like I had the capacity for it now. Like a divine message was happening. Like, we both just felt like this was like some divine, like, you guys need to do this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing the crowd was just like, you know, overall, it was nice to see that the consensus was, I'm ready to do this for my community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an overwhelming number. Like, I did not think that many people were gonna be there.
To be here gathered today in unity, but unfortunately for such a devastating purpose. However, it is a mix of anger, frustration, sadness mixed with feeling eager, feeling liberated. But truly, the reason why we are here is bittersweet.
It's a proud moment. I wasn't expecting it either. I remember, like, kind of standing on that, like, podium thing. It wasn't an actual podium, but just, like, looking into the crowd and seeing so many familiar faces and, like, faces we've never met before. But it was really nice to be able to bring so many people together that really cared about a cause, about, you know, stopping hate and just unity in general. It was definitely a big first time for a lot of the older generation there, and it was nice to have them come out, especially like when the older Asians have been like such a big target in all of the hate crimes. You and I, we just see each other as just two individuals just trying to give a platform, you know. But it was nice to be able to, you know, receive that recognition from the Asian community and be able to give back to them.
One thing that I really want to note about the Atlanta shooting is that it really seems to parallel the Charleston church shootings in 2015 when hate crimes against Black people began to spike. The shooter was coddled and protected, just like now.
Some things that stuck with me were like people talking about the history of like Asian people, Asian Americans in this country, and just like the contributions And like, really, it's a problem because we really are not taught a lot about Asian American history in our classes, and like how long Asian people have been in America and what they've done, you know, to help build this country. I feel like the Asian American community's place in America and in our minds has not been solidified that they belong in America because we're not taught that they've been here forever.
It does not matter who you are, where you are, and where you come from, or what you believe in. We all want the same thing at the end of the day. We want peace, we want love, we want acceptance, we want respect, and we all strive for a better world. Thank you.
First of all, we weren't even expecting to turn into an organization. So then we definitely weren't expecting to host more protests. But it all kind of just like, one thing I've learned with also talking to other protest leaders too is like, we all have a similar story. Like, you don't choose to be a protest leader, you just fall into it. Mm-hmm. And the pieces just come one after another.
Just figure it out as you kind of go along. Like, I think that's what just life is just, we're all just winging it.
What do you think the biggest challenge is moving forward?
I think that a big challenge is getting people to stay involved and to stay engaged, because there's always so many ongoing things happening in the world. You know, like I said, it's easy to become desensitized, but how do we find, you know, other activists, or how do we change like the hearts, the minds of people who like only see like tunnel vision?
We've been thinking more deeply about like, how can we really impact our communities in a way that like creates some like physical change and some really grassroots change that people can actually truly be impacted by in their day-to-day. When you have so many emotions in the beginning of a protest, like everyone's talking about it, and you protest and you feel good, and you protest again and you feel good, and then, you know, the protests die out and it's like people tend to forget.
Exactly. Like, how do we continue to channel like the anger and the frustration? You know, just because you don't hear about it anymore doesn't mean it's gone away.
Right.
So like, what I want to do is to give it relevancy. So this is where it all started a year ago. We are commemorating the lives of the victims that were lost due to the spot shooting, but not just them, everyone from then until now. And it's important we do that to make sure that everyone is remembered and to make sure that things like this don't happen again.
I just think that over the last year, there's been so many victims of anti-Asian hate crimes that, you know, we need to have a moment for. But not only just a vigil, but to celebrate these lives of these people and really bring them back to the forefront of our minds and our hearts.
I think it makes sense to have, you know, our 1 year there, tying in like our 1 year of existing as an organization and our 1 year of commemorating like the memories of these victims.
I hope that, you know, everyone will join us. I just want everyone to know, like, we have been working, we haven't forgotten, that this is still important to us, and that we should be together to remember that day and remember these lives that were lost.
March is Women's History Month, and we're paying tribute to one of the most well-known African-American female authors, the late Zora Neale Hurston. She was also an anthropologist whose novels, short stories, and plays often focused on racial struggles and Black life in the South. Hurston influenced many writers, and American Black journalist Stephen Henderson spoke with one of them, author and Zora Neale Hurston scholar Rae Chesny.
I feel like Zora Neale Hurston is both a well-known figure in literature and history and all kinds of other things, but also kind of an obscure figure in some ways. Like people don't know as much about her as they think they should. One of my favorite kind of trivia things about her is the number of little Black girls I knew growing up whose names were Zora. and I always kind of assumed that that's why they were named that way. It speaks to her influence. But let's start with your fascination with Zora Neale Hurston. What is it about her and her work that draws you to her?
Yeah, so I agree with you. It's funny because if you bring up Zora's name, people will say, "Oh yeah, the lady who wrote Their Eyes Are Watching God." I love that book. But there's so much more to her that we need to know. And we're right between Black History and Women's History Month. And so I think this is a perfect time. My fascination actually started in 2018 when a professor at Michigan State invited me to do a Black History presentation. And as a writer, I have been working with children. We had collaborated through partnership with after school programming and summer camps. He said, "The kids love you. My students love you. Come do a Black History presentation on the person who most influenced your career as a writer." And I was actually a reluctant reader as a child. So I didn't have anyone who really influenced me. I just always loved to tell stories. But Stephen, he gave me this magical word that really changed my mind. He said, "I will pay you an honorarium." And so, and so I
that is a
suddenly
magic
felt,
word.
yes, I had never heard that word in conjunction with my name. So I felt very inspired. And so I set out to do the presentation on Langston Hughes because I love the Harlem Renaissance. Of course, Langston is probably the most popular person from the Harlem Renaissance. And I love that he was a poet, used everyday language, and focused on working class Black men. But as I kept researching Langston, I didn't find a personal connection. Instead, I found Zora Neale Hurston, and I started going down this rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, wait, she was raised in the first all Black incorporated municipality, which just means legally established town in the history of the United States. Her father was mayor 3 times. She was a trained anthropologist in 1928. She interviewed the last person to live during slavery and be enslaved. How come we don't know about her? And she was best friends with Langston Hughes during the Harlem Renaissance. And so I was like, well, how come we don't learn about her? But then I asked myself a hard question. How come I wasn't presenting Zora Neale Hurston? And so that first year I tacked her on to the end of the presentation as an "and" with Langston Hughes. And the sensation as I was presenting her, I would start sweating and everything. And I joked that it was probably Zora jumping up from the grave, telling me, "Don't ever make me an and." And I promised her in that moment, if I ever got another chance to do a Black History presentation, she would be the star of the show. And she has been since that moment. Funny enough, I was assigned Their Eyes Were Watching God in high school, and I did not read the book.
Well, that's pretty common. That's a pretty common thing to happen, right? We all kind of
Yes.
skim in high school.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of the work that she did is especially relevant right now, given the things that we're talking about, and given our renewed focus on the importance of Black history to the present and to the future.
Absolutely. She was typically out of step with the Black thought leaders at the time. She had a lot of pride. At that time, W.E.B. Du Bois had coined the phrase "the talented 10th." And so Zora really opposed that ideology because it separated a certain class of Black people, this upper echelon, away from the roots, the history. And so she did fight to preserve that and to also share it in creative ways. One of the interesting things about Zora is that she often did not want to write full-length novels because it takes so much time. And I can tell you as a writer, it's a lot of investment. It's a long shot. It's a lot of investment of time, of resources. You can't fully work a full-time job. And so she actually took her anthropological field work and staged it as plays. And so she was very focused on theater. And if she could have had her choice, that is what she would have wanted to do. When it came to writing, short stories was kind of her sweet spot. And she felt, hey, I could churn some of those out and still do the plays, still do the anthropological work, but showcase authentic Black life. And even beyond that, life throughout the African diaspora. She traveled to Jamaica and Haiti. Her first application for the Guggenheim was actually to go to West Africa, the Gold Coast, as it was called back then, to trace these roots, to say, hey, the Southern Negro is not as far from these original West African spiritual practice, cultural practices that still exist in Black culture today.
That will do it for this week's One Detroit. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to come back for One Detroit Arts and Culture on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. Head to the One Detroit website for all the stories we're working on. Follow us on social media and sign up for our weekly newsletter.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, MASCO Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. MASCO, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the KRESGE Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. NISSAN Foundation, and viewers like you.